There is a process called de-loving that I developed over 20 years ago. And I certainly wouldn't advise that anybody initiate this process lightly, because it is quite a cruel thing to do to oneself. And maybe, in some cases, it could be a cruel thing to do to the person that you are wanting to de-love yourself from. You see, I've got a problem. There is someone that I am, and I wish it wasn't the case, but I seem to be, for some reason, unable to stop myself. No matter what I do, no matter what activities I have, my life is full and actually busy and so many things to do, but it seems like either my life is superimposed or thoughts of them are superimposed upon my life, or that they're just a background, because from the moment I wake up to the time that I go to sleep, and in my dreams, this person is constantly there. And there are some very specific reasons why, after knowing this person for a year and having quite favorable communication and contact and interactions with them, there are good reasons, or at least I think, why I haven't initiated anything. Because there are just certain things about our circumstances. There's a certain difference between the two of us that I don't think that I should breach, as I think it might be unfair to them. And I hesitate to use the phrase that I can't help the way that I feel, except it surely seems like that. And so, the one thing that I do know that I can do, and maybe perhaps reluctantly so, is to initiate the process of de-loving. It is somewhat related to a process that I used and developed and modified being a student at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, and it's based on something called systematic desensitization. And I used it for the first time for quite a serious presentation for a young lady who was suffering from an arachnophobia for 14 years. And it certainly was a suffering, because this woman had such severe arachnophobia that she could not even travel about outside of her home around the Thanksgiving holiday season because of the prevalence of those cotton cobwebs with the black plastic spiders or other spider decorations everywhere, that it would put her into a hysteria and a panic. And so I used a modified and intensified version of systematic desensitization, and have long since been developing it through various modifications over the past 20 years to great effect. And one of the reasons why I even came up with this de-loving process was because I almost didn't graduate from the Hypnosis Motivation Institute because I became involved with someone who was already a graduate of the school, and it was pretty intense. We were very heavily involved, but there were differences, and I just simply allowed myself to get so entangled in so many ways that I developed the de-loving process at that time, because I heard the term de-loving before, but I couldn't find any information directly on it, or at all, really. And I think that maybe it's because from what I've been able to engineer for my own is that the process is perhaps, I don't want to say dangerous, but maybe it could borderline on being unethical to deploy this on clients, and maybe it's something that could be done in the medical or psychiatric field. I know that there are certain things that are being worked on now that are dealing with the reduction of emotional charge on certain memories for work with post-traumatic stress disorder, which I have a certificate from the Hypnosis Motivation Institute in that, as well as have done work with it, and I'm familiar with it. And it's very useful. There are similarities, and the similarities all come down to the systematic desensitization. Just like most of what we practice at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, HMI, one of our main routes of using clinical hypnosis is through incremental change. It's a behavioral science that we, as professional belief system enhancers, gradually help a person to take control of various different behavioral states, which, behavior is controlled by the subconscious mind, and that's where we operate as clinical hypnotists, with the trances and the suggestions and the various different modalities that we use in hypnosis, including NLP and timeline therapy and guided imagery. And even my first couple of sessions were in past life regression, which they all have. There's a lot of things that are related because all of them in many ways have to do with reducing the undesirable subconscious drivers of behavior and gradually replacing them with desirable and favorable subconscious drivers of behavior. And so this de-loving process, I've decided that I have to begin as soon as possible, because something for some reason as intense as this feeling, this emotion, this state it's almost an obsession that I have for this person. As good as it feels, I think that it's best for me to completely annihilate it. And as I said before, because I'm going to describe the process, maybe in part just to give some clues as to what it actually is. I'm still not sure if I'm even going to release this recording. And as I said, it's not something to be taken lightly, because it is, in many ways, it can be a cruelty to oneself. And even by eliminating this, how it will remove it will make you go cold and almost be unknown. The person, the object of your affection that you are de-loving yourself from, it is as if they will be a stranger to you. It's somewhat like inducing a form of emotional amnesia. But not only that, because nature abhors a vacuum, it is replacing it with various different hypnotic mechanisms, barriers, blocks, bridges, and locks. Or rather than bridges, walls and locks. We're taking down the bridges, so that maybe this is perhaps the most accurate way to say it, so that the loving does not return. And I know the way that sounds, right? It seems to be crazy. That's why I said that it's a cruel thing. Why would anyone want to not love? In some cases, and maybe I'm just a madman, but in some cases, I think that it may be for the best. And I haven't felt like this for anyone or anything close to it in a long, long time. Nor have I felt the feelings that I'm feeling now, which are all forms of deeply intense grief, melancholy. It's a profound sadness, because there's a certainty in which I'm basically going to kill a part of myself. And in a way, because actually it is, I'm killing the part of myself which is in the image of the person whom I adore. So, if you can imagine such a terrible thing, it's like pulling the plug on a loved one who is connected to life support but you've run out of options. I mean, sure, I could let it run its course. I could tell this person exactly how I feel, although I think that would just be too much for them. That's the thing. That's the thing about what is known. And this is why I agree with so many. There are some people that advise not falling in love, and I didn't think that it was something that could happen to me, again, because I haven't felt it at all. Nothing anywhere even close to it. Not even a fondness, not even a slight liking of anybody. Beyond basic, the fact that there are people who are mildly physically attractive, there's been nothing like this. And it's quite imposing, overwhelming. And although I don't want it to, I think that it has to go away. I've made the decision that I have to kill it. It's like, it's a type of euthanasia. You know how so many people consider their pets to be family? They call them their fur babies. I sometimes say fur family. And there have been, I know at least once many years ago, when I was a bit more emotional and vulnerable than I am now, that I wept for the loss of a pet who had to be euthanized because of a health issue. And I wasn't even anywhere near. I was in a different part of the state, and I actually woke up in tears from a dream about it, and then asked one of my siblings, my sister, about it, and then she told me, she asked the question, when did you have this dream? And I said it was 2 days ago, and then she told me that's when it happened. So I find that fascinating. Now, some people might not get that. It sounds a little woo-woo, but that's what happened. Somehow there was a connection that was severed that I felt, almost as if Smokey was his name. It was a black lab pit bull mix, as if he was saying goodbye. And that's what I'm talking about here with this grief that I'm feeling. I don't really feel usually any compromised emotions. Mostly I vacillate between an ice-cold calm and indifference. Sometimes elation, even a little bit of mania, but not like a joyful mania. Except when I'm listening to death metal, maybe I like that a lot, but it's usually rage, anger, a seething, an almost violent, predatory type of feeling. Like it's a strange thing, almost as if I was born angry. Like the scene in the first Avengers movie when Captain America said, "Dr. Banner, I think right now might be a good time for you to get angry." And he says, "That's my secret, Cap. I'm always angry." But this is a rare time that I feel this compromised emotion. And the first time that I really started to decide that it has to be done, this de-loving process, I remember I actually saw her, and she said that she could feel it. So I know that there's something more going on that could be said to be metaphysical. Like I said, that people might think that the feeling that I had waking up with my dog dying from a dream and feeling it like it was saying goodbye, but something about my emotional aura, she was able to feel it. She even commented that she doesn't like it when I feel that way. She didn't know exactly what it was, and I passed it off, I played it off, I said something else. But it wasn't really exactly completely a lie. I just said that, I said that I'm going to miss you. And she was going on a trip. And she said, you can miss me when I'm gone. But that's what's happening now. It's just a certainty that when you know, I know how effective this is, because even getting to something like 42% of the way from the situation that I talked about back in 2005 was sufficient enough to cause to affect the de-loving process to the point where it didn't matter anymore. And I've also used various different fragmented applications of this in different situations that I know how effective it is, even in its incomplete form. But in the way that I understand now, after I've been practicing and developing it over the years, is that the sequence that I've put together, the entire protocol, that what I'm going to do in order to build up safeguards and contingency plans to really disrupt any return of this state of being, is that I have to implement every single step 100%, even when I get to a point where I feel like it is already done, which in this case, the way that I feel about her, I don't think that anything short of the complete protocol plus some of the other further supportive systems, and there are also what could be termed as booster modalities or amplifiers that I think that I may need to apply to this in order to extinguish and annihilate this state of being completely. I'm talking about a form of this is murder. This is psycho-spiritual, emotional murder. And it comes complete with a burial ceremony and funeral rites. But I have to do it. And so, the de-loving process has to begin. So, in order for the process to be effective, for anyone who feels the way that I described earlier, which in itself is somewhat of a form of a strange, pleasurable cruelty all in itself, is this inability to extract amorous and affectionate feelings for someone from your constant and continuous, it's like the cosmic background radiation after the Big Bang. It's everywhere, all the time, in everything, no matter what I do. I don't know of anything that I've done since realizing how I was feeling that I haven't felt like this and thought about her. And I don't want to feel like this anymore. Which is even a strange thing to say, because it's not that I don't want to. I'm not sure that there's I don't think that there's an accurate way to describe what this is. It's not an unwant. It's not an undesire to feel this way. Can you imagine what I'm saying? I know it sounds quite mad, because it feels good. All I ever think about her are wonderful, amazing, good things. Such a generic, plain word to say good things, right? So plain. It doesn't even do it any justice. So one would wonder, why would you want to get rid of that? It's distracting, to say the least. I know I've begun to establish myself in the area that's close proximity to her, and where it's almost inescapable now, the things that I'm doing, where I'm bound to have encounters. And I just need to execute and drain the life out of this, so that, I mean, there's no going back to normal. Nothing about this is normal at all. It's basically the equivalent of like one of the most heinous things you can think of, right? It's almost the equivalent. It's like committing a murder and then suiciding is what it's like. All to extricate this atmosphere of this extreme, intense, visceral affection and adoration. It has to be destroyed. I don't think that I am I may not even be completely sane right now, because almost none of this makes sense to me. I'm not sure why I feel so strongly and why I've made the decision that I have to do this to myself, and maybe to them. Because we won't even be friends anymore after this. If that's even what we are. I mean, we're friendly, at the very least. Everything between us is beautiful. We have a beautiful relationship for what it is, whatever it is. It's fantastic. I'm quite elated, and I feel joyful, and I'm excited to see her all the time, and her interactions with me seem to be reciprocal, and it's amazing. There's absolutely nothing wrong, except for my own flawed inconsistency and internal strife, and whatever understanding I think I have that tells me that I have to do this in order to just, maybe it's selfish. Maybe I'm not doing anything for her. I might think that I'm releasing her from this emotional grip. I mean, surely she can feel it. But I have to sever it. So the deloving process begins with this all-pervasive thought pattern, which is the collective, descriptive, emotional, visual, the state of being in which it's the signal of her. So whoever the person is, if you're having anything similar to I am, it's not difficult at all to summon the thought of this person. And then what has to be applied comes in several stages. So it is very theatrical. And you know what? I'm going to describe it, but not in full. I think that this will be a primer, and I will decide after the reception of this, because I'm turning this recording into a book. So if people want to actually use this, I'm going to advise against it. But I do understand that this might be a better state of being to apply this for some people than the way they may currently feel with this type of extreme state. And so people can make that decision for themselves. So I'll just describe the overall outline, probably over the next 10 minutes of what the process is, and I won't really fill in the details because it's a lot. And some people might be able to reverse engineer from this, but the sequence begins with the person. And what is done, the theatrical part, is that you place yourself in a scenario with that person. So like, for example, this lovely lady, I've never had any issues with. There've never been any arguments, fights, or disagreements, or even any, no negative feel, at least not in our encounters, with each other. There's no bad blood at all whatsoever. But that's what you have to start to implement. You have to go through a sequence in which first you start to sever the good relationship mentally, psychologically, and emotionally by basically acting out in your imagination that there are various different disagreements, that the disagreements are on point. Even if you're not this kind of person, you can imagine that you are, but that there are disagreements that are so different in fundamental core belief systems that you have to walk away from the person. It's like if somebody, to use an extreme example, if somebody just decides that all of a sudden they want to become, a genocidal maniac, and you're just like, well, ideologically, I can't get on board with that whatsoever. And if that's what you want to do, I can't have anything to do with you. It has to be such a severe, flawed characteristic that you impart to them the version of them that lives in you, that you disagree with it so vehemently that you are imagining yourself walking away from them over and over and over, and you rehearse it so much that it starts to lay down a track within your nervous system and in your memory, and eventually it will become as something that has happened and becomes part of your past and becomes part of the file that you associate with this person. So that's the first step. So I think that I can give it in 3 major steps and just skip the other 24 layers which make up the 100% of this here, and I'll just give the three major points here, and that was the first one, which is the disagreement and dissolution of the friendship, right? Because every good relationship has an element of friendship in it somewhere, regardless of what percentage that is. And that's the thing that holds things together, is the friendship part. So you have to destroy that. You have to destroy the friendship by coming up with a scenario in which the disagreement is so clear and so sufficiently severing, and it's undeniable that it's a deal breaker, right? That you and that has to be repeated over and over again. So the repetition and the association, right? Those 2 laws of hypnosis and self-hypnosis. And so that the first thing that begins to happen is that you associate that person with this thing. Like, so some other examples might be, there are a lot of people who can understand this part, because a lot of people have very strong opinions about politicians. There are people who talk about this president, that, and I. So you understand what I mean. Or there are people who've gotten divorces because their spouse voted for somebody, right? So it's that kind of intense feeling that, and maybe some people don't have that, but you can imagine any terrible, horrible characteristic or aspect about someone, or you can imagine them being some kind of like cruel offender of some kind, which I don't want to name certain things, but you can just guess, right, that this person does, and you attach that to them, that the falling out is total and complete. See, because this is in the military, as they say, to eliminate with extreme prejudice. You can't hold back. You have to absolutely, it's absolute. You have to associate this person completely with this thing that you totally abhor, that you would never become friends with a person that either becomes this or you find this out about them, right? Like imagine you find something out about someone, and sometimes that's the path that you go to take this. You can also go through the route of acting it out in the imagination, that is something that you discover about the person. There are various different clues. So you have to get to it systematically and in incremental ways that you arrive at this conclusion about them. That's actually one of the better ways to do it, that it starts to, they're sneaking suspicions. It really is a whole story. You're really like acting out a screenplay or a stage play, right? It's really a show, or like a good book. Like, you really have to go into the details. That's why there are 27 steps altogether. Plus, there are 6 additional amplifiers as well. But I'm giving the 3 main ones. So, that is the first one, is the estrangement part. You can call it the estrangement protocol. Actually, I don't even want to give the names that I use for it, because they are, but the way that they're named actually can help someone reverse engineer it much more quickly by the names that I formalized for this protocol, for the de-loving. So that's the first part. The second part, after you go do that, and there's 9 steps within there, is the sacrifice, which is more closely to what I was talking about in the sense that it's a murder homicide. Because what happens in this step is that it's a scenario in imagination, once again, with repetition and association, in which, if you can imagine, so here's a good thing. Some people may not have seen this movie, but it's a good example to use. Is there was a Superman movie, and the General Zod, he was using his heat vision, or the laser eyes, whatever you want to call them, right? And he was directing them towards people. And Superman was telling him he was begging him to stop. And he had him in a headlock, and he's begging him to stop. And Zod, refused to do so. And he was going to kill all these people, all these humans. And, Henry Cavill, the character, he played the part really well, because, he doesn't, one of the aspects about Superman is that he doesn't kill, right? So he was very, very conflicted, and Zod wouldn't stop. No matter what he'd do, he couldn't knock him unconscious. There was no stopping him. So he had him in this headlock, and as he was, his beam was getting towards where these people were, Superman, in, an act of desperation, he made the decision to kill him by breaking his neck. And so the process that is enacted at this second major milestone is the same. Is once you've associated the person with this abhorrent characteristic, this thing that they do that you just absolutely cannot tolerate, it's the breaking point, that you find that they are committing it over and over again, that they are doing this thing over and over again. And so you have no other choice but to stop them. And so this is you have to annihilate that version of them, which is the transmuted version of them that you formerly loved. And then you found out this terrible thing about them, and they won't stop doing it. And the only way to stop them is by destroying that version of them that they've transformed into. And then finally, the third step in the de-loving process is the funeral rites, which I said earlier as also the burial, but in the versions that I've developed in the most extreme form, the funeral rites are a combination of a burial and a cremation. And so once you've eliminated this basically evil version of the person, and I know, once again, you can hear how insane this sounds, right? It's quite extreme. That's why I said it's a cruel thing to do to yourself and to the image of this other person, is that if you can imagine just a typical kind of funeral that you see that are depicted in various forms of visual entertainment like TVs and movies, where the people are gathered around the coffin and they're saying their final goodbyes, and the casket closes, and then they lower it into the ground and people throw dirt on it. Well, the combination of that scene, but it's being lowered into an extreme sun type of heat source. So you're literally lowering it into a sun in the hole in the ground so that it completely disintegrates. It's an immolation. It's a purification by fire, so that it is completely eliminated. So those are the three primary steps: is this disassociation, that transmutation, where you take them from this person you have a sincere, affectionate concern for, the person that you love or in love with, and you map onto them through repetition and association this evil trait, which is a behavior, something that they do that cannot be tolerated, which is why you sever the friendship and you can no longer be associated with them anymore. And you come about this by way of discovery, certain clues, uncover it, and then you witness it for yourself. And you confront them and you break up your friendship or relationship, whatever it is. But then you find, and this is all in the imagination, the theater of the mind, and then you find that they're continuing to do it. And the only way to stop them is by destroying them. And so there are various different ways. I don't have to speak about all the different ways that execution can happen, right? You can leave that to your imagination. There's all kinds of cruelties that humans do, but if you want to think about it clinically, like in people who are on death row, you can think about it that way. And you can there are even capture scenarios, right, where a person has to be apprehended by the law, the police, before they're put in jail and they're sentenced, right? So all of that can be part of the visualization, and I'm giving away a little bit too much. And so then that part is executed, and then there's the funeral rites, in which they are lowered into the sun, into the buried sun that completely disintegrates that version of them. So you have the excommunication, the execution, and the disintegration. Then after that, as I said, there's 27 steps there, and then there are 6 other protocols. There are 33 altogether. Here's one bonus that also works, because the more detailed you get into this imaginative scenario, the more complete that the de-loving process will be. And so then what you do is something similar to what you would do if this were a real situation. You, in your mind, you go around, and even if you don't have pictures of this person, like I don't have any photos of this person, right? But like, imagine in a relationship, or people have family photos of their kids or their dog, like whatever, your girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever, your partner. And you can do this as many times as it's necessary. You go around in your house, but it could be a house from your imagination. And you just imagine that there are various different photos of them, of you with them, of them with your friends, of them with your dog, in all kinds of different situations, of them smiling, them laughing. There could be, online videos, like any way or shape or form you can find that there's recorded media of them. Is you're basically going through and you're just snuffing out and destroying in every way. You're erasing the hard drives of all the various different images and likenesses of that person from your mind. And something that just came to mind, because one of the first things when I was actually first doing this, the movie, some people may know it's called Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and it's something very similar as well. It's a major inspiration from the idea, and when I started learning about and investigating and doing research on the de-loving process. But you can reference that movie and see what I'm talking about. The process is somewhat similar, except the technology that's being used here is our hypnotic modalities and reprogramming, deprogramming and reprogramming. And so you are eliminating all of those files, the sound of their voice, the sound of their laughter, all of that stuff, right? And you're quarantining them and as many times as you have to, because there are follow-up sessions. You're also going to go to that buried sun, and you're going to periodically drop them in there, like how you would with your phone when it builds up caches and memory starts to get filled up, because this thing works in the background, and you constantly have to take all of them, aggregate all those files together, and then dump them into the buried sun so that they can be disintegrated. And you also do this with, like I was saying, with sound files, all kind of, even there might be like writing in things that are written down with their name. You even have to do it with their name, their whole name spelled out, their birth date, like all this stuff. You can take like a birth certificate. You can even make a death certificate. Wow, I'm giving away a lot here, but not enough. I'm making this process clear so you can understand the steps of what it entails. People might be able to reverse engineer this for themselves. But also I'm leaving enough so that if someone wants to know more about it, I will hand over the protocol. But I may do so reluctantly. I don't think that this is something that should be out in the world. It is actually really some, to put it in some very pedestrian terms, it's quite powerful stuff. So there are those parts there of, the estrangement, the execution, the disintegration, and then the deletion of the files, right? And then, as I was saying, nature abhors a vacuum. So now you can't just, nuke the site from orbit and leave, a crater in the earth and there just be this giant hole in your being. You have to replace it with something. And the best thing to do is to replace it with a clone of that person and go back to the time when you didn't know them and they were just a person that you didn't know. And for some of us, there might be what some people call love at first sight, right? So when you first saw them, and unfortunately that was what it was with me, you just kind of knew, and you just kept going back, and it just built. And maybe you should have known better from the beginning to just stay away. But you didn't. You kept on having encounters. And you knew it was getting to a breaking point, to a threshold. You should have backed off then, but you didn't. So you get to that point where you saw them and that spark happened. And this is another thing that needs to happen. You need to go through the whole protocol all over again. You need to attach that estrangement, execution, and disintegration to that beginning point. And then move right before it. There's a point at which there is time, there's an arrow of time, at which when you encounter the person before that so-called love at first sight locks in, there's a point where there's almost nothing there, where you have to register it. For a lot of people, for me, it wasn't. It felt like it was almost immediate. There's almost nothing. There was almost no time. It was just instant contact. It was actually something I even felt before I walked into the door. And I remember I looked to my left, and there she was. So you have to get to that point. And you have to install that pre-contact point when it wasn't there. And that's why I say, and why I haven't given away this protocol, all of it, because of the steps, because this part is probably the most cruel of all. Because you get to the point where you almost don't recognize them anymore. I know, because I did it once just as an experiment, not on somebody that I cared about. I just did it with somebody that I saw a lot but had no real feelings for. And I went through the protocol just to see what would happen. And I almost totally forgot who they were. They had to remind me. And so you develop, as I said, a form of emotional amnesia, but it can go even further, because you can get to a point where there's no cognition of them at all, and it's like brand new. It's almost like they'll ask you questions like, "What's wrong with you?" And they'll say your name and stuff like that, and you'll be like, "I don't know you." And it'll be so real and sincere that it actually will cause the person to be so frustrated and weirded out by you that they'll see you around, but will think that you're playing some kind of cruel joke, and then they just kind of just give up and be like, "What a weirdo, what a jerk, what an asshole." And so that's the final part that will do it for you, because it's so extreme that they will think that you are, that it's like you're doing a bad prank, but you just won't let go of the prank. And so they're finally like, "This is not funny anymore, why don't you stop it?" And then they just give up, because they're like, "Okay, well, obviously you don't want to be my friend anymore," or something like that. "You're acting like you don't know me." And so then it becomes complete. And that's why I say that it's cruel, not just to yourself for eliminating something which, as in my case, is such a wonderful person and an experience. It's not something I want to give up. It's just, for some reason, I feel like I have to, and I don't know why. Maybe there's some part of myself that I need to explore, that needs to figure out why would I sabotage. Why am I self-sabotaging like this? Is there some threshold that I'm not willing? I don't understand it. But I'm going to do it before I change my mind. It may be for the best to de-love. And so that's the de-loving protocol. That's the overview. And it is not to be taken lightly, but it will change your life in various different ways. You'll know that you've done something, and you'll know that you've done it. You remember the process, the steps. Like, I know it. I know I've done it before, but there will be these strange glitches that eventually, it's like a scar, where you notice it at the edges of your being and your memory at first, and you can kind of see that there's something scarring over there, like a glitch. But it eventually grafts well, and it heals, and it smooths into the rest of your experience. And only when you decide that you want to recall it, you can see that there's a wound there. But most of the time, you won't, and you don't, because why would you? I am Hakeem Ali Bocas Alexander.